We've all heard the rumours. Scandinavia is the happiest place in the world. Every time a survey is done, Sweden and its Nordic neighbours consistently outrank every other country in the world for being the happiest places to live. In a recent survey done by Our World in Data, 95% of Swedish respondents said that they were happy. But what does this actually mean? As somebody that's now been in Sweden for nearly 2.5 years, I feel like I've got a pretty good idea of what makes it so good, but also where there's room for improvements. So today I thought I'd put it to the test. But I can't expect you guys to take my word for it, so that's why we're going to do an investigation to get to the bottom of this once and for all. Is Sweden really as happy as you've heard? So grab your shoes, it's time for us to hit the streets, speak to some real Swedish people and see what they really think. Oh, did you think I was serious? I can't just go around the streets talking to people. We're in the middle of a pandemic. It's definitely got nothing to do with the fact that I'm way too self-conscious for that. Thankfully, we've got the Happy Planet Index where we can get all of the answers we need and I don't have to talk to any strangers. So to help us in our quest today, guys, we are using the Happy Planet Index, or the HPI. And the reason for that is because this index looks at sustainable well-being. It's looking at what you need as a nation to have a long, happy, sustainable life, which is something that lots of the traditional measures don't usually look at and maybe skew the results. So let's dig in and see what the truth is behind all of this. Okay, so here is the world, and you can see red is the lowest and green is the highest level of happiness. And straight off the bat, guys, there's some real surprises with the data that we're getting here. Norway sticks out as one of the only countries in Europe which is figuring as green, aka happy. The actual happiest countries in the world appear to be Mexico, Ecuador, and then quite a few down here in the South Asian Pacific. You've got Vietnam and Thailand both figuring quite high, but not so much of the rest of Europe. But of course, we're here today to talk about Sweden, so let's look at the score in Sweden. Okay, interesting, 28.0, which puts it as 61st out of 140 countries based on happiness. Now, interestingly, 61st place only just about squeezes Sweden into the top half of the leaderboard based on the 140 countries that the HPI have surveyed. But then when we dig down into the individual measures that they're using to make these decisions, there's a very different story. Well, let's start with well-being then, because you would think that is quite closely tied to how happy a population is. And as you can see when we dig down here, Sweden comes out 4th out of 140 countries with an average score of 7.6 out of 10. So while I would have hoped to have seen some higher numbers up there, Sweden is clearly doing a lot better than a lot of its competitors in this space. But from my own experience, it would make sense that well-being is something that Sweden is good at. They have long vacation periods in the summer, people get at least 5 weeks of paid vacation, there's really good state benefits, a really good healthcare system. You can understand why people feel well. And if we look at access to nature, the same story is painted here in Sweden. There is nature everywhere, there's forests, there's lakes, there's islands. It's easy to get out and enjoy the countryside around you, which in turn makes you feel well. So not surprising they figured so high. Similarly, on the inequality scale here, we can see that Sweden figures very, very high. 3rd in the world out of the 140 countries that have been surveyed, with just an inequality of 6%. Again, it's kind of difficult to really dig into the data here because we don't really know what the 6% is. 6% of what? But my assumption would be we're talking about the amount of people that live underneath the poverty line, which is about 6% here in Sweden. Again, if you look at the global scale here, it's kind of disappointing that 6% of people living below the poverty line is considered a really good result. But if we look at the results from the Borgen Project, who measured the whole of the EU, they say that the average in the EU of people living below the poverty line is 10%. So in comparison to that, Sweden is doing quite well. And again, I don't think we're just talking about inequality in terms of money here. I think we're talking about inequality in terms of gender roles and stereotypes. It does feel that the society is really forward thinking in that space. They've really done a lot to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be treated the same and equally and get the same sorts of opportunities. You see that, for example, in parental care, where there's a big push to make sure that the men leave work and spend time with their children so that the women don't suffer from being outside of the job market for too long. And talking about being on the right tracks here, we have to drill down into life expectancy because Sweden has the 9th best life expectancy in the world, 81.8 years. And again, 9th gives you the impression that Sweden's got a long way left to go, but that's really not the case because the highest life expectancy in the world is in Japan, where they have an average life expectancy of about 84 years. So Sweden's only about 2 years behind. And why might this be, you ask? I really think we need to turn to healthcare for the answer here. Sweden's healthcare system is rated as one of the best in the world, the rate of treatment, the rate of care you get, so it's no surprise that people are living longer. And beyond that, Our World in Data talk about the fact that in Sweden they have a really low level of pollution, the air quality is really good, access to clean quality water is really good. All of these factors are driving up that life expectancy. So if we keep everything we've heard in mind right now, I'm really struggling to see why Sweden only ranks as 61st out of 140 countries. it feels like they're doing really well. And the answer to this one lies in the ecological footprint measure, where we can see that disappointingly, Sweden ranks 132 out of 140 countries for the size of the ecological footprint per person. Here it's 7.3 hectares per person. Now this would kind of suggest that here in Sweden, the actions we take have a colossal impact on the environment. But to really understand what's going wrong here, I think we need to zoom back out to the macro level and take a look at one of the countries that's doing a lot better in this space. Okay, so here we are back on the global level. Let's take a look at Mexico and see what it is that's driving up such a high score here, second out of 140 countries overall. Now I must admit, I'm a little bit surprised here, because you would have thought that Mexico was doing wonders when it came to ecological footprint, because that was the measure that really affected Sweden's results. But when we dig down into the data here, Mexico is only about halfway up the list. It's about 77th out of 140 countries. So they have an average of 2.9 global hectares per person. But that's still obviously a great improvement on what we're talking about here in Sweden. So let's dig into what it is that's really having that impact. Now we've actually got a bit of an analysis here, which we didn't get on the Swedish page, where we can kind of dig into what it is that's really having the impact here. And it seems to be the fact that Mexico has committed to long-term climate targets through national legislation, and it did it early. And they're doing a lot to conserve their forestry and protect their biodiversity. Okay, so this changes my mind a little bit, because it makes me think that perhaps it's not that Sweden's doing badly, it's just that they haven't committed to action as early as Mexico perhaps did. It really feels like, when you read the data here, that Mexico's doing a lot before a lot of other countries even woke up to this fact. Again, playing devil's advocate here, you could say that ecological footprint isn't something that you would usually think about when you're talking about someone's happiness. So if we're talking about from a human perspective, it's kind of not a surprise that Sweden's coming out so high, or sometimes on top, because the data here says the same thing. It's only when we look at the impact on the environment that things begin to change. Well, there you have it, guys. Perhaps Sweden is as happy as we've heard after all. If you listen to the HPI, it's clear that there's still quite a long way to go to make sure that the entire ecosystem gets to enjoy that happiness rather than just the humans. But if we take just a purely human angle here, it feels like people are quite happy. Lives are generally quite long, well-being is generally quite good, and equality is generally quite low. All impressive measures to see. But now I really want to turn this over to you guys. Do you really think Sweden is as happy as you've heard? How does it compare to its neighbours here in the Nordics? And what could they be doing to make sure that people are even happier here? And then finally, if you're interested, I will leave the link to the HPI index in the description below, so that you can go and check out your own country and see how it compares to Sweden. Anyway, that's just about all I've got time for today, so I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please drop me a like, so I know you like stuff like this and I can do more like it in the future. If you haven't seen my video about the cost of living here in Sweden, you might want to go and check that one out as well. And then once you're done, why not drop me a subscribe, turn on the notification bell, so you're the first person to know as soon as I put out a new video, which at the minute is about twice a week. So look out for lots more content coming very, very soon. But until then, stay happy, have a great day, and I will see you soon. Bye guys.